So let's continue with our discussion about Kodshim and Menachos. And today we'll discuss Lechem Apan. Now, in the Mizbeach of the Chutz, in the Azara, they brought most of the Karbonos. Inside the Heichal, there was a Shulchan Azar. And in addition to the Mizbeach HaPnimi and the Menorah, all of which were in the Heichal, there was also a Shulchan. Now, what was placed on the Shulchan that was made of gold? Lechem Apanim, B'dei Shabbos l'Shabbos. Every Shabbos, and we'll talk about when the Kohanim came and how they arranged the Lechem Apanim. There was an Asiyah of Lechem Apanim. Now, first we're going to discuss the volume of soles, meaning of refined flour that was necessary to create the 12 chalos for the Lechem Apanim. What we need is 24 se'in of chitim, which is a serious volume of wheat. Tochlin also l'soles. So now we grind down 24 se'in of wheat, making it into a flour. Umenaprin also, now we sift the flour. The achadis right now. It's interesting. Until now we spoke about 12 napas. Now we're down to 11. Now, what do you get from the 24 se'in of chitin that you began with? Hotziu mimenu esrim v'arba esrone soles. They were able to produce from the original 24 se'in of chitim, after the tchina and the nipui, they were able to create 24 esronim of soles. Now, they took this 24 esronim and they divided it up into two. And 24 divided into 2 gives you 12. So they had 12 lechavim. And just give me a second. I'm going to just try to see if I can improve the sound. Okay. That's a little bit better. So now we have 24 se'in that create 24 esronim. And we're going to divide up these esronim. And from each 2 esronim, we're going to get 1 loaf of bread. So that from the 24 esronim, we end up with 12 loaves of bread, 12 chalos, which are called lechem apanim. Now, the Mishnah in Masechta Menachos records a shita, dissenting view of Rabbi Shimon. He holds that there's no set amount of nipui. You don't have to sift it X number of times, according to Chachamim 11 times. But you'll see exactly when you produce, fine flour. Now, what do we need as far as this avoda of lechem apanim? We need obviously soles, but we don't need shemen. There's no admixture of oil. We're going to need hagosha and tnufa. And then we're going to need sidur halechem al shulchan. We're going to need organizing and placing the lechem on the shulchan. First, we're going to discuss, what did this lechem look like? Was it round? Was it square? Our wives make challahs, and there's so many options. So number one, the phrase lechem apanim means it has faces. How many faces does it have? It has 4 faces, meaning it's an absolute square. Now, what is the length, the width, the height of this square lechem? Orech kol lechem asara tvachim. So the length is going to be 10 tvachim long, which is quite a long piece of challah, lechem. Now, on the corners of the lechem, the Mishnah says that they were made of 7 etzbot, 7 fingers. So what did these corners of the lechem look like? And here we have a machlokus between the Rambam and Rashi. The Rambam holds that on every one of the four corners of the lechem, there was a horn, a keren, that was actually 7 etzbos long. So what he's looking at is a square bread that has horns on it, on each of the four corners. That's the sheet of the Rambam. Rashi's sheet is that the gova of the lechem, the height of the bread, was sheva etzbos. Now, according to the Rambam, that the sheva etzbos in the Mishnah is referring to the chronos, these corners. So what exactly was the height of the lechem? We don't really know. Perhaps it was 5 tefachim, we're not sure. But in any event, what we are sure is that according to Rashi, the height of the lechem was sheva etzbos. So it was very long, as we said before, it was asar tefachim. But as far as the height is concerned, it wasn't very hard. I guess you'd call it like a baguette. Now, how do we place these lechamim, we're all told 12, on the shulchan? It says, b'shtei marochos, there are 2 sets of lechem aponim. Shisha lechamim, there are 6 on each set, one on top of the other. We're going to see how they're separated one from the other, because if they're not separated one from the other, then it would cause spoilage, because they took them right out of the oven and put them on the shulchan. And if you would stack them one on top of the other the way that they touched each other, then we're afraid it could cause spoilage. Even though, again, there was a great miracle that the lechem aponim was never spoiled, but there's a principle called ein somchim ala nes. We don't rely on a miracle. So we got to do it the way nature would have it, and to guarantee that there wouldn't be spoilage as a result of the hot breads, we would make sure to separate one bread from the other. But basically, it was stacked in 2 stacks vertically on the 2 sides of the shulchan, 6 on one, 6 on the other. Benichim es orach halechem lerofo shel hashulchan. Now, this is a little bit of a problem, because what the Gemara is telling us is that the length of the lechem was to the width of the shulchan. Now, how wide was the shulchan? He says that the width of the shulchan was amma, was only 1 amma. Now, wait a second. There's something that doesn't fit over here, because we said that the orech of the lechem was asara tefachim. Asara tefachim is more than an amma. How can it possibly be that they laid down, right? If this is the rochav of the shulchan, and they laid down the lechem la'orech, if the orech was 6 tefachim, it was 10 tefachim, then how could 10 tefachim fit into a width of 1 amma? But the answer to that is that although the width of the shulchan was 1 amma, but it was 1 amma long. It was 2 ammas long. So the shulchan had a compartment which was 1 amma by 2 ammas. And therefore, if you place the lechem to the rochav, you have now 2 ammas. So if the lechem was only asara tefachim, then it could fit into 2 ammas. But now we get into the question is how long is an amma? So there are 2 types of amos, but we're dealing with the amma of 6 tefachim. So if the amma is 6 tefachim, and the width of the shulchan is 1 amma by 2 amos, on the 2 amma side, we have 12 tefachim. And if the lechem is 10 tefachim, it can be laid down on the shulchan. Now, what's very, very important for us to understand about the lechem aponim is that it requires another carbon, so to speak, that has to accompany it, and that's called levona. Now, let's understand that the levona is a spice. In English, it's called frankincense. and it was placed in two bazichin. Bazichin are spoons. A bazach is a spoon. Beis zayin chaf, and we'll see about the size of the spoon. And what we did was we put a spoonful of frankincense, of lavona, on each one of these vertical columns of 6 lechavim. So there was one bezech on the left, one bezech on the right. And when Shabbos came around, being the second Shabbos, a week after the Kohanim placed the lechem aponim on the shulchan, the two bazichin were taken onto the mizbeach, poured onto the mizbeach, and then they were burnt on the mizbeach. That's called haktoras shtei habazichin. Now, keep in mind that since we're dealing with Shabbos, we're going to apply the principle that avoda docha Shabbos. Even though we don't allow burning things on Shabbos, but for the sake of an avoda, like the avoda the bazichin, we're going to burn them on Shabbos. The Gemara later on in the Masechta Yoma, we didn't get to it yet. It's going to have a whole debate about when on Shabbos they would exactly do the Haktoras HaBazichin. Why? Because there are two karbonos that are unique to Shabbos. One is called Musaf, and the other is called Shnei HaBazichin. So we finished all the avoda of the whole week, which is also on Shabbos, meaning the Tamid. And after we finish with the Tamid, what do we pick up? Do we pick up now the special avoda of the Bazichin, or do we go straight away to the Musafim, and then we'll postpone the Bazichin until after the Musafim? And this is all based on psukim. I mean, there's no, shall I say, rational logic that would incline one way or the other. You know, sometimes we say that in Seder Avodah we have a principle called Tadir V'Sheino Tadir Tadir Kodshim, but that doesn't have any relevance here because the Musafim were every Shabbos and the Bazich were every Shabbos. So as far as Tadir, they're exactly the same, but it's based on psukim. In any event, we're now ready for the Haktoras HaBazich. Now here we have a very important principle. And that is a matir. Now let's try to explain what we mean by that. We've touched on this in the past. Sometimes when you have two karbanos, one accompanying the other, one is matir the other. So for example, if we were discussing lechem hapanim, the lechem hapanim are accompanied by the shnei kivsei atzeres, and the Shnei Kivsei Atzeres are matir, the lechem, the shtei alechem. Did I say lechem? I meant to say shtei alechem, sorry. So that when we're makriv, whatever that means, maybe it means Zrika Sadav, maybe it means as early as the Shechita, but we get to some point in Akrava, the Shnei Kvasim, and that's going to be matir, the shtei alechem. So again, just to summarize, sometimes you have something in the Mikdash which needs a matir. It cannot be matir itself. And a perfect example of this is going to be the lechem hapanim in its relationship to the levona. The bazichin, the two spoonfuls of levona, must be brought on the mizbeach before we can be matir the lechem hapanim. The lechem hapanim will be divvied up amongst the kohanim when they're removed from the mizbeach on the second Shabbos, but the kohanim could not eat the lechem hapanim until after the bazichin were burnt on the mizbeach. And what that would mean is that if for one reason or another we couldn't be matir the bazichin, they got lost, they were contaminated. In those cases, we do not have a matir for the lechem hapanim. And we'll have to see exactly what we do with the lechem hapanim in such a case when there's no mat. So mincha zu ba im levona, the mincha which is called the lechem hapanim is accompanied by a levona. Ve'hem b'shnei bazichin shebetocham kometz levona. Now we have a shear of how much levon you have to put in each one of these two bazichim. It's called a kometz, right? A kometz means how much would the Kohen be able to catch in 3 fingers? So he grabs 3 fingers worth and he then frees his fingers, and whatever falls down, that's called a kometz. That's the amount of levona that has to go into each of the 2 bazichim. And we need the 2 marachas of 6 lechamim, of 6 of the lechem aponim on each side. We need 1 kometz of levona for each one of the 2 marachas. So we're not going to require 12 kometzim, but rather we're going to require 2. 1 kometz for the left, that's 6, and the other for the right is the other 6. Now there's a discussion in the Mishnah in Menachos about exactly how much space there was between the bezichim and the lechamim that were on the shulchan, the lechem aponim. We know that they had, the bazichim had to be in close proximity, but exactly how close, that's a subject of the Mishnah in Menachos Daf Tzadi Vav. And the Gemara quotes the sheet of Abba Shaul. He says that Hayu Menichim es habazichim berevach shel shnei hatfachim she'al hashulchan. And if I understand correctly, what he's saying is that there's going to be a certain space that separates the bottom lechamim from the top. So when we talk about the lechem aponim, and we go from one lechem to the one above it, there's going to be a space in between, and that space is going to be shnei tfachim. That's where we're going to place the bazichim, according to Abba Shaul. Now, how many kohanim do we need for the lechem aponim? We're organizing the lechem aponim on the shulchan. Number 1, we need 4 kohanim to carry the lechamim. So each one of these kohanim is going to carry 6 lechamim. All told, 2 times 6 is 12. So that one kohen is holding on to one marach of 6 lechamim, and the other to the other marach. Now we're up to the bazichei levon. So we got spoonfuls of levon. Shnei kohen. Bezech echad biyad. Kol echad biyad. Even though, like for example, the Kohen Gadol on Yom Kippurim, he's got the kaf in one hand, the machta in the other hand. We could have actually had the 2 bazichim being brought in by one single kohen, and he would carry one bazich in his left hand, one in his right hand. No, we need 2 kohen, and this is called the Rov Am Hajas Melech. We want to get more kohenim involved. I mean, you could ask me, why didn't we have 12 kohenim carrying in the lechem aponim? We had 2 kohenim each carrying one marach of 6 lechamim. That would double the number of kohanim, 6 times 2. But the answer is that with regard to the lechem aponim, there are 2 marachos of 6. We cannot split the marach. We cannot allow one kohen. Let's say, for example, we could have one kohen carrying all 12 lechamim. We're not going to allow it, because every marach requires its own kohen. Every marach of 6 lechamim is an entity unto itself, requiring a kohen. So we have 6 on one side, 6 on the other. That's going to require 2. And the same is true for the bazichim, right? We have 1 bazich for each maracha, 1 bezech, and each will be carried by a kohen. So we're up to the next section.
The are actually on the shulchan, or they're on tablets?
It seems that According to Abba Shol, we don't know exactly how it was suspended in that airspace of 2 tefachim above the shulchan. Was there a ledge? I don't know. Okay. And just 1 second, I want to just, before we go on, give me a second to make the calculation. Right. So we're up to how many Kohanim now? 4 Kohanim. Right. We have 2 Kohanim carrying each 6 lechamim, and we have 2 Kohanim carrying, respectively, a bezek of levon. So we're now up to 4 Kohanim. Odar Ba Kohanim. Now we need another 4 Kohanim. Makdimim with Mehem, who came before, earlier than the 4 Kohanim that we were discussing. So we need another 4 Kohanim to empty out the shulchan from last week's lechem aponim plus bazichim. Again, the same number 4. So you'll have 2 Kohanim each taking 6 lechamim off the shulchan to make room for the new 6 lechamim on each side, and the same with the bazichim. Now, how do we know that they had to come first? Because you can't put the new lechamim down until you empty the shulchan of the old lechamim. You don't need to be a rocket scientist for that. However, here's the catch-22 in this whole. Siluk halechem vabazichim, right? This is the group that came earlier to remove. Hayunasim bevas achas im hanachosam. There was such a perfect coordination between the 2 groups of 4 Kohanim, such that the 4 Kohanim who took off last week's lechem aponim from the shulchan were immediately, the second group of 4 Kohanim replaced the former weeks, the earlier weeks, lechem aponim and bezichim, with the new weeks, lechem aponim and bezichim. And this is derived from the pasuk in Shmos Perek Chaf Hey Parshas Truma. It says, "Lefanai tamid." The shulchan has to have on it the lechem aponim tamid. And what does that mean? Elu moshchem mikan es hayishonim. Elu menichem tachteim es hachadoshim. Shlo yeh lashulchan rega echad lo lechem. There shouldn't be 1 split second where the shulchan is empty without lechem. Now, the only way you could engineer that is if the new week's lechamim are placed under, in other words, they push them under the, do you follow what I'm saying? In other words, the kohanim that are removing the lechem aponim, and that's what second the shulchan seems to be empty, but the answer is that the new group of 4 kohanim, the new group of the lechem aponim, is somehow being pushed underneath the other lechem. But that's not what he says. This is Berzon talking. What he says is that, again, siluk halechem v'zichno yonases b'vas achas im hanachasom elu moshchem mikan es hayishonim v'elu menichem tachteim es hachadoshim. Again, if I understand what he's saying, as they were removing the Yeshonim, the other Kohanim were placing the Chadoshim right underneath. Again, I can't imagine that there wasn't a fraction of a second.
I would think they were sliding. If I'm sliding this off or you're sliding the new one out,
Right.
then
Maybe that's what he
it's always
means.
up.
You might be right, Steve. I don't know. He just says, Elu menichem tachteim es hachadoshim. I don't know. Tachteim es hachadoshim. Now he quotes Rabbi Yossi. I just want to see how we're doing on the clock. Okay, we don't have that much time, but let's see if we can finish this. Rabbi Yossi says, ain't tzarich. We don't need to engineer all this fancy stuff. Eladai b'kach, it's enough. Shelo yolin hashulchan laila echad below lechem. The word tamid, according to Rabbi Yossi, does not mean 24/7. There's not even a split second without anything on the shulchan. What it means is that we can't leave the shulchan empty overnight. So Rabbi Yossi is basically borrowing the concept of lina and grafting it here in the word tamid with regard to lechem hapanim. We have a psul called lina, which means that we're not allowed to leave something overnight. And here, the shulchan, like other zvachim, should not be left overnight. Now, in the case of lina, what it means is that you left it through the entire night. Here also, you left the shulchan empty through the entire night. So that's going to be the machlokas between the Tanakama and Rav Yossi. Now, just before I finish this up, if I have your attention, I would like to add a little bit of Agadata here. The Gemara derives a very important conclusion from this seder of the maracha of the lechem hapanim. The Gemara says in Masechta Menachos on the pasuk V'gisa bo yomam v'layla, which Yoshua instructs us that we should be studying Torah day and night. So the Gemara tells us that, I'm trying to remember his name, but one student, maybe the name will pop into my mind. I don't have the Gemara Menachos in front of me, but oh yeah, his name is Ben Dama. And Ben Dama raised his hand and he asked a question to Rabbi Shmuel. And he said, can I study Greek philosophy? Why? Because I know all the Torah. I've gone through it all. Again, that was before they published, Shas and Yerushalmi and Sifros and Friya Mechilta and so forth. And he claims he knows the whole Torah. So he asked Rabbi Yishmael, who's his uncle, can I now go out and study Chachma Yavanis? That was the philosophy, the knowledge of the time, science of its time. So the Gemara says, Karalov es hamikra v'gisa bo yomam v'layla. Say ubedok zman shu lo min hayom v'lo min halayla. Go find a slice of time that's neither night nor day. And not Bein HaShvashos, because Bein HaShvashos is either night or day, or maybe it's both, but we don't know what it is. And then you can learn Chachma Yavanis. And then the Gemara says he equated it with Lechem hapanim. That just like the Gisa bo yom v'layla means that when one period of time ends, the other period of time begins, so there's no interval between them, which would allow for the study of Greek philosophy. So too, in Lechem hapanim, there's no interval between last week's Lechem hapanim and the new week's Lechem hapanim. Obviously, the Gemara there is reflecting the sheet of the Chachamim, because according to Rabbi Yossi, what could you prove from Lechem hapanim? The Lechem hapanim would be replaced sometime during the course of the night, but you might have 10, 11, 12, almost 12 hours in which the Shulchan was in. All right, just to finish this up, he says the following. Liachar mikan. Okay, so now we've replaced the old lechem with the new lechem. Maktirim es halevona. We take the bazichin, which have the levona in it, we pour them on the mizbeach, and we burn it on the mizbeach. Ubekach. As a result, halechem nitar lachila. Now the kohen could eat the lechem hapanim. Umechalkim also the kohen gadol. The kohen gadol will get half he'll get 6 out of the 12. Ulakonei mishmar, and the outgoing mishmar of Kohanim, we will give them part of the lechamim. Mishmar nichnas shall also shaf, and the incoming mishmar. So we're going to divide up 6 lechamim that are earmarked for the Kohen Gadol, 6 that we've divided between the 2 mishmaros, the mishmar yotze and the mishmar nichnas of the Kohen. Okay, then that's where we'll stop for today. Okay, then now we'll study Masechta